Good morning. Welcome. I hope you're having a great morning. My name is Trejay and I blog over at aheartforwisdom.com. Thanks for joining me. I hope you have a day that is filled with grace and journey, or grace along your journey. And I just want to give you some encouragement, some nuggets, some treasures that you can take with you along your day that will encourage you to keep making progress and keep stepping forward and to continue to make inroads into enemy territory, because there is breakthrough on the other side of whatever challenge that you're dealing with. And so I just want to encourage you to remember that as you're doing anything, anything new, anytime that you step out to do something in obedience to God, anytime that you're, whether it's a new job, whether it's mothering, whether it's being a father, whatever aspect of life there's always changes, there's always transitions, and we want to learn how to navigate those transitions and those changes better. And so one thing I was thinking about is how we have to factor in opposition. And we need to remember that regardless of the work that we're doing, whether it seems big to us or whether it seems insignificant, everything that we do for the kingdom of God is making inroads into enemy territory. So anytime that we advance, we're always advancing at the enemy's expense, meaning that we're always advancing and we're taking territory away from the enemy. So anytime that we make a decision, whether it's change the way that we eat or exercise or whatever it is, read our Bible more, whenever we take steps to advance, the enemy is always there to put up roadblocks or to try to stop us, because he knows that on the other side of that obedience is a blessing. On the other side of that obedience, there are other lives that will be changed as a result of us obeying whatever it is that God tells us to do. And so his job is to make it as difficult as he can for us to advance, hoping that it will deter us, slow us down, or stop us from taking his territory. And so any enemy is, not just going to roll over and let you come in and take from them. You have to take it by force. That's what the word says. The violent take it by force. So I was thinking about Nehemiah, and I was reading some things. I was reading my Bible, and I just got to thinking about just all the different things that Nehemiah had to contend with. There was opposition all along the way. God had put it in his heart. He had a burden for his people, and he wanted to rebuild the wall to provide a measure of safety for his people. And so through a course of miraculous events, which I think we'll talk about maybe next time, but through a course of miraculous events, here he is. He's starting this journey to rebuild the wall. And all along the journey, he's running into enemies left and right. And so I was just thinking about how Nehemiah kept really good margins, even with his enemies. Sometimes we need to have, not sometimes, actually all the time, we need to have boundaries and we need to have borders against anything that is negative, doom, or gloom. We need to give it no room. Anything that's doom or gloom, we need to give it no room, no place, no comfort within our walls, within our boundaries, in our minds, in our souls, in our spirits. And we need to be very vigilant about that, because the enemy is always seeking a way to devour. He's always seeking someone to devour. And if we let down our guards like Adam did in the garden, and if we don't speak up, and if we're not forceful with the enemy, then we'll find ourselves doing things or experiencing things that God never intended for us to do or experience. And, it could be a good thing. It could be, something as simple as serving at church. But serving at church is great. But we need to do the activities that we're led to by the Spirit, not the activities that everybody and their brother want us to participate in. Whether it's church, whether it's work, whatever it is, we need to have good boundaries and not allow our bodies to be trash dumps. So I was just thinking about how Nehemiah did a really good job at that. God helped him to give him strategy at every point. And really, the enemy should not be given free rein in our lives. He should not be able to speak into our lives. he should not be the final authority in our lives. So, for example, if you're starting a new habit of, like I'm working on changing the way I'm eating, I'm working on exercising and those kinds of things, which seem really simple, but at the moment that you're doing it, it's like you always feel good after you've done those things, but just getting yourself to do that sometimes can be a challenge. And so, the enemy would love to say, well, that, eating that apple is not going to make that big of a difference, or having just a salad is not going to be that big of a difference, or whatever it is, to try to marginalize and try to lessen your efforts of obedience. And so we don't want to ever get to the point where we trivialize obedience. If God tells us to do something as simple as don't eat the piece of candy, eat the apple instead, then that should be a big deal to us. And his voice should be louder than the enemy's voice. Is what I want to encourage you, is that listen to the voices that you're listening to. Do they line up with the Word of God? Are they in agreement with what God says about you? And if not, we need to establish some boundaries and some borders so that those voices don't have priority. We can't stop the voices. Like, for example, Brother Hagin used to say, you can't prevent birds from flying over your head, but you can prevent them from making a nest in your hair. So, in other words, negativity is all around us. It's all over. It's in the media, it's in music, it's in just everywhere. There's negativity. So you can't stop the negativity, but you can stop it from coming inside you, from getting and burying and make a place in your heart or in your mind, those strongholds. We can do something about that. And so, the enemy's tactic is to get you to stop. Or if he can't stop you, to at least slow you down to the point where you get so discouraged that you don't want to keep going. And so the more place we give the enemy, the less progress we're going to make along our journey. And so Nehemiah did a really good job of this. And again, the enemy was relentless. Nehemiah is doing this great work for God, and they're making progress. But the enemy just kept attacking. I don't know about you, but there's times in my life where I think, oh, not one more thing. Can we ever just have a period where it's just, and I can get a breather, but that's not the way life is going to be. It says, Jesus told us we're going to have troubles, we're going to have tribulations, things were going to happen in these last days, but to be of good cheer because he overcame the world. He gave us the ability to deal with them. And because we're alive in this time, that means we have the added equipment that we need to be supercharged to make it through to the end in victory. So Nehemiah prays this prayer. And he says in verse 4 of Nehemiah 4, "Hear, O God, for we are despised, and turn their reproach upon their own head, and give them for prey for captivity." We built the wall, and all the wall was joined together until half its height. But the people had a mind to work. And so some things that I just noticed as I was reading was the pressure was on, the heat was on, they were being bombarded, but the people had a mind to work. They had determined that they were going to finish this project and that they were going to have victory. So because they made a determination to make it through the end, regardless of what challenges they were going to have to face, they made it to the end. But it wasn't without being contested. Every decision requires a commitment. So if like for me, if I want to eat better, I have to make a decision not to do something, not to eat something, but to eat something different. I have to, if I want to exercise, I have to make a decision to make the time to exercise. There are things that I will have to say yes to and things that I will have to say no to in order to get the progress and the desired results. And that's on anything, whether it's spiritually, whether it's naturally. If you want to get out of debt, there's things that you have to say no to. You're going to have to set up borders. You're going to have to set up boundaries. And so I just want to remind you that margin means the edge or border of something. So in other words, just like a piece of paper has boundaries, you're going to have to set up boundaries in your life so that the negativity, the doom, the gloom, the bad decisions, whatever you're replacing one decision with, you're going to have to replace it with something else. So, again, if you say yes to something, that means you're going to have to say no to something else. And so we need to realize that this is part of the journey, to not get, feel bad because, oh no, there's pressure, and we need to factor in that pressure. We need to give margin and room, realizing that there's going to be pressure. There's going to be things that will try to slow you down, and we need to allow extra room to be able to deal with those things. We need not to ignore them, not to push them to the side, but to realize trouble's going to come. We're going to have to make a decision of, do we eat that brownie because everybody else is eating the brownie? Or, do we go to that party because everybody else is going to the party? But we know that we've made a commitment, not to do certain things or whatever it is. Do I allow that negative word to pierce my heart? Do I allow what somebody else thinks of my work or my performance to stop me from being in the place that God has set me in? So for example, like if you're on the job or something and you're, doing work, or maybe somebody doesn't appreciate your work, or maybe you feel like as a mom, people don't appreciate you. Well, do I let what somebody else thinks about me be the ruling factor? Or do I let what God says about me be the ruling factor? So if I'm in a place, I need to make a decision that this is the place that God has put me, and I'm staying in this place until God moves me. God's going to be the one that moves me. I'm not moving because the enemy, put me down. I'm not moving because the enemy said I'm not doing a good job. I'm not moving because, I feel that they don't appreciate me. I'm not moving because I feel like what they said about me hurt me. Whatever it is, what they think about me, what I think they're thinking about me, because sometimes they're not even thinking about you, but we just get it in my head that, oh my gosh, they looked at me funny, and obviously it always turns negative. Why is that? Someone looks at me funny and I think, oh no, and it's always negative. Why isn't it positive? Oh, they probably looked at me because, because they see God, or I don't know, whatever it is, why couldn't it be something positive? Why couldn't they looked at you because they liked what you were wearing? Why couldn't they have looked at you because they like your smile? Or why does it always have to be negative? So anyway, we need to establish boundaries. We need to establish margins. The enemy should not have free reign. And so anyway, they're building, they're working, and we need to remember that anything that is worth anything will require a fight. If there is something to what you're doing, the enemy is not going to let you take ground from him uncontested. He will fight you all along the way, and we need to be prepared. If we make a decision, we need to realize, okay, the fight is coming. There is going to be trouble coming, but that doesn't make me cower. That doesn't make me not go forward. What it does make me decide to do is all the more harder I've got to press into God. All the more harder I've got to get that word that God spoke to me settled down into my heart, so that I don't lose heart in the middle of the journey, because the middle is come. There always will be a beginning, a middle, and an end to everything that we deal with, So we need to realize, okay, great, we started the journey, woo, all excited. But in the middle comes. And the middle is the part where you're in between the beginning and the end. And sometimes it's hard to see the end when you're in the middle. And so they got to a point where everybody was discouraged and the work was slowing down because the people were discouraged. They had been hyped up at the beginning, but now there's no outward confirmation that what they're doing is going to be successful. There's, they're troubled on every side. They've got people constantly hounding them. Negativity is all around them. It's getting inside of them. And what do you do when you're in the middle? And so I was just thinking about that also you have to realize is that when you're in the middle, you have to remember that any new endeavor that God gives you is taking territory, lives, money, influence. All of that is being lost to Satan. it is costing him. Every time you advance, it costs Satan big time. And so he can't afford to let you do that. That's why he brings as much of anything that he can to stop you, and he throws out innuendos and threats. If you do this, I will do this to you. If you do this, then this will happen. If you're honest, then, they'll leave you. Or if you stand up for what's right, you'll lose all your friends. There's always innuendos of something that, may or may never happen. But that threat causes fear that makes us want to cower and step back. But the Lord says he takes no pleasure in those who draw back. He wants us to move forward in victory because the Lord really, at the end of the day, it's us that the Lord is after. At the end of the day, all of the stuff that we do, all of the, stuff that we have is not going to matter. What is going to matter is our heart, our character, and our relationship with him. And those people that we lead to him. And so I read this article by Stephen J. Cole, and he talked about the 6 things that you can be sure to face when you decide to advance your walk with God. And this could be in any area. So first of all, he says that the name Satan means adversary. He is committed to opposing God and his people, especially when they are zealous to exalt God's glory. So anytime you're making a new endeavor, that endeavor is going to end up in a testimony that's going to give glory to God. And the enemy knows that. The more your testimony is shared, the more glory God gets, and the more other people are inspired to make changes as well. That, again, costs him big time. So he talks about one of the first things that you'll face is the anger of others against you. So the Hebrew word burning mad, describing Nehemiah's enemies, means, the Hebrew word for, anger meant burning mad. So, and then he gave this example of what happens when a wife meets Christ. Her zeal for God convicts her husband of his wicked ways, and he responds with anger. Satan's aim is to get the new Christian to cool his commitment or her commitment to the Lord. And if anger doesn't stop the work, Satan hauls out another tool. And so the Stephen J. Cole says the second tool is mockery and sarcasm. Nehemiah 4:2. They talked about the fox on the wall, and if the fox walked on it, the wall would fall down. And so they were doing whatever they could to intimidate them and make them feel small. That's what David's brother Eliab did when David brought the cheese and crackers to his brothers. He said, "Who did you leave those few sheep with?" It's always belittling, always trying to get you down. But if you let that in, it's your fault. If you let that stop you and prevent you from moving forward, it's your fault. It's not the enemy's fault. You let it in. And so we're responsible to guard, to tend our hearts. We're responsible to what we allow in, what we allow out. And so I just want to encourage you, don't let the enemy intimidate you. Don't let him belittle you. Don't let him use people to cause you to feel small when God has made you great, because God says greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. So don't let the sarcasm or criticism or mockery. The third thing was threats and intimidation. And then the fourth thing is discouragement and exhaustion. And this is what we were talking about earlier, is that there will come a middle time. There will come a middle point when you're far away from the beginning and you're not to the end yet. And so he says right in the middle of things, exhaustion and discouragement set in. People have lost their initial zeal, and all they can see are the piles of rubble still waiting to be removed. They feel like quitting, and your weariness can lead you to discouragement. So that's what Stephen J. Cole said. And so I just want to encourage you that maybe you're in that middle point where the one door is shut, the next door hasn't opened, and you're in the hallway. And I heard Lindsay Roberts describe it like, it's hell in the hallway, because nothing's open and it's dark and they're narrow. And, usually hallways are not very big. They're usually, kind of small and sometimes kind of tight. And so I just want to encourage you. Don't be overwhelmed by the rubble. Don't be overwhelmed by how far you have to go. Look at the little by little improvements that have been made, because God told the Israelites, hey, you're not getting the promised land all at one time. Little by little, lest the animals overrun it. And the animals would actually be worse than the people, I guess. So it's just remembering what God does in you is little. And sometimes we don't see how much we've changed until someone says something or someone points it out. Like I was talking to somebody the other day about our kids, and they're like, oh my goodness, how much they've changed and how they've grown and da 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 da. And well, I'm with them every day. And so I don't always see that. There's times where I see glimpses of things, but then there's times where I don't really notice the everyday because I'm in it every day. And so I just want to encourage you that you're with yourself every day, but I guarantee that if you went before the Lord would tell you, hey, look how far you've come. Look what we've done together. Look how you've submitted to me when you wanted to fly off the handle. Look how you kept your mouth shut. Look how you loved when that person was mean to you. The Lord would show you things that, okay, yeah, there are things to be changed, but this is what we're working on today. And that's what I want to encourage you. What are you working on today? What is it that you're supposed to work on today? Margin, boundaries. Give your enemies boundaries. Give yourself boundaries and room to grow. And so, a lot of times when we start cleaning up an area, like I was cleaning out my closet, it ended up being messier in the middle of the cleaning process, than the beginning, because I had to take everything out. I needed to, make changes. And so sometimes change is messy. Sometimes transition is messy. Sometimes progress is messy, but don't look at the mess. Focus your eyes on God. And so, and celebrate where you've come. Then the fifth thing that Stephen J. Cole gives is negativism. Try saying that 10 times fast. So he said this negativism came from Jews themselves who lived near the enemy in Nehemiah 4:12. These people were not involved in the work of the rebuilding of the wall. That is significant. They lived near the enemy, thus were constantly exposed to his negative attacks on the work. And they weren't involved personally in the work. So they were hearing negative reports and threats that they didn't have firsthand information on. And they didn't know firsthand what God was doing in Jerusalem. So they would come repeatedly, over and over, to warn Nehemiah and those working on the wall. So they will come up against us from every place where you may turn. And so there are people who are not in the middle of your situation. They haven't been given the vision. They didn't hear what God said to you. They are just kind of on the outside looking in, but they see the enemies and they're thinking they're being helpful. And so that's why we need to have boundaries. We need to have borders. We can't just let everybody into the new thing that we're doing, or everybody in. And so, the example, there's giants in the lands. We're grasshoppers. There's no way we can win the land. There is a place to factor in the enemies. There is a place to recognize, and yeah, we do have enemies. But again, don't give room for the doom and gloom. Don't give room for it. Nehemiah didn't ignore the danger that existed, but if he had listened to the prophets, if he had listened to other people, he would have never finished the work. So I just want to encourage you. Be careful who you listen to. Be careful who you allow speak into you. Be careful what you think about you. Be careful what negative things you're saying about you and about what you're able to do. Be careful and put up boundaries and borders that this is a negative-free zone. If you're going to be negative, out. Jesus put family members out when he went to Jairus' house because they were negative. They were crying. They were not helping the situation. And so sometimes we think, if we just had someone to cry with us, we'd be okay. Well, no, that's not going to help you. You need a faith buddy that's going to say, get out negativity, and we're raising this thing up. This thing is going to happen. We're moving forward. You're going to get victory. You're going to finish school. You're going to, get your diploma. You're going to get that raise or that promotion. You're gonna be able to accomplish what God says you can accomplish. We need people who are in our lives that will do that. And the sixth and final thing is fear. And it says, historian Will Durant said this: Rome remained great as long as she had enemies who forced her to unity, vision, and heroism. When she had overcome all her enemies, she flourished for a moment and then began to die. Opposition is what kept Rome strong. So on those days when we feel like, if another thing happens, if another person says another thing, if I have to deal with another, trouble or tribulation, just remember that the opposition is what's making you strong. The opposition is what's making you and propelling you and can make you better, or it can make you bitter. The choice is yours. You decide those margins. You decide those boundaries. You decide what the enemy can say and what he can't say. That's your decision. So, Nehemiah was a man that, had trouble. He faced a lot of trouble, but he would always pray and he would always look to God. He would always, okay, what do we do? God, give me wisdom. Even if it was just quiet in his heart, maybe he didn't speak it out loud, but he always looked to the Lord to give him strategy. And every time he did, he got strategy. And when they got strategy, they moved forward. So sometimes what we're missing in our lives is strategy from the Lord. So, we may try all this self-help stuff. Well, our self is what got us in the problem in the first place. So how are we going to self-help us out of something that we self-helped us into? So I just want to encourage you that, like Nehemiah, your strategy and your victory comes from the Lord. And as you spend time with him, seeking him, asking him questions, listening, because sometimes that's my thing, is I'll ask, but then I'll, get to doing something, or I've got to have a decision now, or, feeling that pressure of time, people, and money. And so allow yourself to sit still. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. I want to encourage you to take some time to actually listen and to find out, what's the strategy for today? What are we doing today? How can I conquer this thing? Or how can I, overcome this negative word by this person, or the feeling of negativity, or a feeling that, nobody's on my side, or the doom and gloom. And God will give you wisdom. He'll show you things to do. And if we'll listen, we'll get victory. And we can come together and work together, doing our part. The walls will get rebuilt. Doing our part will pave the way for Jesus to be able to come and to return. And so I just want to encourage you that your part is important. And the fact that you have opposition doesn't mean that you've done something wrong. It could very well mean that you're doing something right. So just know that whenever you step out to do something, there will be a middle, there will be a beginning, and there will be an end. And as we continue to keep our focus on God and keep everyone around us focus on God, we're going to see victory, and those walls will get built, and the enemy will be kept out, and we'll make even more progress, and we'll take more people with us. So be encouraged today that you can overcome, that you can set boundaries and margins for your enemy. You can keep the negativity out. You can give no room for doom and gloom, and you make that decision. You have the power, because greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. So be encouraged today to think back on those 6 things and allow, the Holy Spirit to bring you revelation to see where you've succumbed to those things, and then get it out. Make no room for doubt, get it out, and move forward in victory. So thanks for joining me. Hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.